I stood in the suffocating silence of my dark study, watching my daughter-in-law slide a stolen key into my fireproof cabinet to raid my deceased wife's inheritance files. How does a woman who claims to love your only son end up treating your family's private sanctuary like a crime scene? She thought she was outsmarting a frail, grieving old man she could easily bleed dry. She had no idea. I am an architect who spent 40 years analyzing structural integrity and spotting hidden fractures before a building collapses. I knew exactly how to dismantle a parasite. If you have ever looked at someone your child brought home and felt an immediate freezing chill in your gut, you know why I did it. You know that terrifying instinct that screams something is wrong, even when everyone else is smiling. Honestly, if you were sitting in my shoes, I don't know if you could have stayed calm for 2 long years. I had to play the long game because attacking a man's new love only pushes him closer to her. My late wife, Maya, had taught me that kindness without steel boundaries is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Maya had been a pediatric oncologist who faced the ugliest realities of life every single day before cancer took her from me. She left behind a legacy, a beautiful historic brownstone in Lincoln Park, and a massive trust for our son, Julian. Julian was 34, an incredibly talented structural engineer who would give you his last dollar and apologize if it wasn't enough. That was his fatal flaw. Generosity is a beautiful trait until a predator spots it. The target on Julian's back became blindingly bright the evening he brought Vanessa to my home for Sunday roast. The brownstone was a masterpiece of original oak trim, stained glass, and real historical character. Vanessa was 28, polished, sharp, and possessed a practiced charm that felt entirely rehearsed in front of a mirror. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. Her eyes immediately darted past me to take inventory of the room. She didn't look at our family photos or the artwork Maya had painted with her failing hands. She looked at the crown molding. She estimated the square footage. She was appraising her next conquest. During dinner, Vanessa leaned forward, resting her chin on her manicured hands, looking at me with wide, performative innocence. She asked about my architecture career and the history of Lincoln Park. Then, her questions took a calculated detour into my private finances. Are the property taxes astronomical for a historic estate like this? Is it exhausting maintaining such a massive home completely by yourself? Do you still keep an aggressive investment portfolio in your retirement? I set my fork down slowly. The air left the room. I looked at Julian. He was smiling blindly, completely ecstatic that his new girlfriend was taking such an interest in his old man. It was sickening. Vanessa wasn't trying to build a connection. She was running a financial audit on my life. I want you to pause and think about your own family for a second. If you were sitting at that table watching a stranger measure your wealth, what would you do? Would you cause a scene and alienate your only child? Or would you smile, nod, and quietly prepare for war? I chose the quiet war. The very next morning at 8 sharp, I was sitting in the polished glass office of my estate attorney downtown. I wasn't being a paranoid, bitter widower. I was honoring a sacred promise. Before Maya passed, she had insisted on creating an ironclad, impenetrable family trust. She had watched her own mother get financially ruined by a charismatic, opportunistic second husband. Maya knew that predators exist. She knew they use love as a master key to rob people. The trust held the brownstone, the investment portfolios, and a substantial life insurance policy. Julian was the sole beneficiary, but he had absolutely zero access to the principal until his 40th birthday. He didn't even know the fund existed. Maya wanted him to grind, to struggle, and to build his own character before inheriting millions. But now that Vanessa had entered the picture, I had my lawyer tighten every single legal loophole. When Julian announced his engagement 6 months later, I forced a strict prenuptial agreement into play. I made sure it didn't look like it came from me. My legal team presented it as standard administrative protocol for trusts of our size. Vanessa signed it. She complained bitterly to Julian behind closed doors. She called me a controlling tyrant. But she signed it anyway. That was her mistake. She signed it because she falsely believed she could manipulate her way around a legal document once she had a wedding ring. The wedding itself was a lavish, stressful production that drained Julian's personal savings. Vanessa demanded a high-end hotel venue in the Loop. Her designer dress cost more than a reliable vehicle. I smiled for the cameras, paid for the flowers, and watched her kiss my son. Her eyes were scanning the wealthy guests. My heart broke for Julian. He was entirely in the dark. The storm hit their marriage faster than anyone anticipated. They moved into Julian's modest two-bedroom condo in the West Loop, an incredible property he had paid off entirely on his own. Within 4 months, Vanessa began planting seeds of deep discontent in his mind. "This place is suffocating," she would whisper in the dark. "The neighbors are far too loud. We need a real backyard for a family." She didn't demand a new house. She just made him feel guilty for his success. Julian, desperate to make his new wife happy, came to my kitchen table and asked for a massive loan. I calmly refused. That was when Vanessa shifted her strategy to something far more dangerous. The following week, Julian returned to the brownstone looking exhausted, with dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes. "Vanessa thinks it would be beautiful if we moved in here with you," he said, avoiding my eyes. "She says it's practical. She says we can take care of you as you age. She said the house is too big for an old man and a ghost." I felt a cold, radiating fury in my chest. I didn't blame Julian. I blamed the puppet master. I told him no. I told him I valued my privacy. Julian snapped, accusing me of never giving Vanessa a fair chance, and stormed out of the house. We didn't speak for a month. During that year of silence, Vanessa escalated her plans. She suddenly quit her corporate logistics job, claiming her manager was toxic, and she needed to launch her own independent consulting firm. Julian, being the fiercely supportive partner he was, took on the entire financial burden. He paid the condo fees, the utilities, the groceries, and her luxury gym membership. He even covered her $600 a month luxury car lease. He drained his energy working 60 hours a week, while she sat in upscale coffee shops with her laptop, pretending to build an empire. I watched the timeline closely. 22 months passed. Not a single dollar of revenue ever materialized. Instead, Vanessa's obsession with my estate grew completely unhinged. She began asking Julian if I had a living will. She suggested hiring contractors to renovate my kitchen, offering to personally oversee the project. She was trying to nest in a house she didn't own. Everything exploded on a freezing Tuesday afternoon. I had a routine cardiology appointment at Northwestern Memorial Hospital that was supposed to take 4 hours. Julian was stuck in meetings downtown. The brownstone was supposed to be completely empty. But my doctor had a sudden medical emergency, and my appointment was canceled after 30 minutes. I caught a cab back to Lincoln Park. I walked up the snowy stone steps. I unlocked the front door. The house was dead silent. But as I took off my coat, I saw a faint sliver of light cutting across the dark hallway floor. It was coming from my study. The room was always locked. I walked down the corridor, my heart hammering violently against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pushed the heavy oak door open. Vanessa was standing there. She was frozen in front of my open, fireproof filing cabinet. She had confidential manila folders spread across my mahogany desk. Bank statements, tax returns, property deeds. She looked up. The blood vanished from her face. No one said a word. If you have ever caught someone in a betrayal so absolute that the air itself turns to ice, you know that silence. I want to be entirely honest with you. If I had walked into my home and found a relative violating my privacy like that, I would have lost my mind. I would have been screaming at the top of my lungs. But I didn't. I just stood in the doorway, leaned my shoulder against the frame, and watched her panic. My silence terrified her. Vanessa scrambled to gather her composure, trying to weaponize her practiced charm. She lied and said Julian asked her to check on the house. She said she noticed the door was unlocked. She said she was just looking for a pen. It was entirely pathetic. I walked over to the desk, took the folders from her hands, and pointed to the exit. "Get out," I said. She ran out. I didn't call Julian immediately. I sat in my leather chair for 3 hours, staring at Maya's photograph on my desk, realizing the foundation had fractured. The time had come to shatter my son's illusion, even if the truth broke his heart into pieces. The next morning at 9, I drove over to Julian's West Loop condo. He buzzed me up without saying a word. When I stepped inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Julian was standing by the counter, gripping his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles turned entirely white. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Vanessa was sitting on their velvet couch, her arms crossed, looking entirely defiant. She had spent the night spinning a victim narrative, painting me as a hostile, secretive tyrant. I sat down in the armchair across from them, keeping my heavy winter coat on. I looked directly into her cold eyes. "You broke into my private study," I said. My voice was quiet. It carried absolute weight. Vanessa scoffed and tossed her hair. "I was looking out for our future," she shouted. "You are 70 years old, Martin. Julian is your only child. It is incredibly selfish that you keep your financial estate hidden from us. If something happens to you, we are the ones who have to deal with the legal mess." I was being practical. I slowly turned my head to look at my son. "Did you authorize her to search my private records?" Julian swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the floor. "No, Dad, I didn't." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. She realized her husband wasn't falling into line. "Julian, I saw the legal papers," she cried, her voice shifting into a desperate, manipulative whimper. "He has structured the entire trust to completely exclude me. Even after we got married, even after everything I have sacrificed to build a life with you, he treats you like an incompetent child." I stood up slowly. "That trust was established by Julian's mother 15 years ago," I said clearly. "It holds the house, the investment portfolios, and the insurance policies. It is worth $2.5 million. And you are right about one thing, Vanessa. You will never see a single dime of it. The prenup protects it. The trust seals it. It is entirely bulletproof." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. $2.5 million. The number hung in the air like a physical entity. Vanessa's eyes widened to the size of coins. You could literally see the internal calculation running behind her eyes as she realized the true scale of the wealth she had been fighting for. And then she realized she was locked out forever. She lost her mind. She stood up, her face turning a deep, ugly crimson. "You are a paranoid, abusive old man," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "You have hated me since the day Julian brought me home. You never wanted your son to grow up and leave you. I gave up my career for this family. I run this household. I am his wife." I didn't raise my voice. I just delivered the final, devastating blow. "You haven't worked a single day in 22 months, I said. "You told Julian you were launching a consulting firm. I hired a private corporate investigator to audit your business records last week. Your LLC does not exist. You never registered it with the state of Illinois. You have no website, no registration, and 0 clients. You have been sitting in luxury cafes spending my son's hard-earned money while he destroys his health working overtime for you. You aren't a wife, Vanessa. You are an economic parasite." Vanessa gasped, turning to Julian for protection. She expected him to defend her honor. She expected him to scream at me for invading their privacy. But Julian just stood there. He looked entirely hollowed out. He looked at the woman he shared a bed with, and he finally saw the monster beneath the polish. This is the most agonizing moment in any parent's life. Watching your child realize that the person they loved was just using them as a financial stepping stone. If you have ever poured your entire soul into someone who was secretly calculating your net worth, you know the exact sickness Julian was feeling. It is a betrayal that fundamentally rewrites your understanding of reality. Julian set his coffee mug down on the counter. The sharp clink echoed through the modern apartment. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I want to see the trust documents. Take me to the brownstone." Vanessa panicked, throwing her body in front of the door. "Julian, please don't do this," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Don't let him poison your mind against me. He wants to destroy us. We can go to marriage counseling." Julian looked right through her body like she was made of glass. "I need to read what my mother left for me," he said quietly. He walked past her. She didn't move. We drove back to Lincoln Park through a heavy Chicago snowstorm. The city was turning white. When we walked into the brownstone, the old house felt completely different. It felt like a sanctuary that was finally shedding its secrets. I led Julian down the dim hallway and punched the code into the deadbolt. April 9th, his mother's birthday. The heavy lock clicked back. We stepped into the cedar-scented room. I went straight to the fireproof cabinet and pulled out the legal portfolios. But I didn't give them to him first. I reached all the way to the back of the bottom drawer and pulled out a worn, sealed envelope. Maya's elegant, swooping blue handwriting was written across the front. "For Julian, when you need to remember who you are." I handed the paper to my son. Your mother wrote this 3 weeks before her lungs failed, I told him softly. She made me swear to keep it hidden until you were in real danger. I am sorry I kept you in the dark for so long. I thought I was protecting your happiness. I was wrong. Julian took the letter, his entire body trembling as he sat down in my leather desk chair. He carefully broke the sap seal and unfolded the pages. I walked over to the frost-covered window, turning my back to give him absolute privacy. I knew every sentence by heart. Maya had written about her own childhood trauma, watching her mother get evicted from her own home by a predatory second husband. She wrote about Julian's pure, beautiful heart. She told him his empathy was his greatest asset, but without a shield, it would destroy him. She warned him that the world contains people who do not possess the capacity to love. They only possess the capacity to calculate. They look at a good man's kindness and see an open vault. But it was the final paragraph that shattered his illusion completely. Julian read it out loud, his voice cracking and rough in the quiet office. Pay attention to how people act when they believe they have absolutely nothing to gain from you, he whispered. Generosity under observation is just a theatrical performance. Generosity in the absolute dark is character. Find a woman who builds you up when no one is watching. That is the only person worth trusting with your life. Julian lowered the paper to his lap. A single tear fell, smudging the old blue ink. She knew, Dad, he said. She knew I would be blind. She wasn't a prophet, Julian, I said, turning from the window. She was just a mother who understood how predators operate. Julian sat in that leather chair for over an hour. The silence was absolute. He was connecting the dots of his entire marriage. The way Vanessa never asked about his internal life. The way she threw a violent tantrum when he suggested cutting back their vacation budget. The way she stared at my brownstone with naked, unadulterated greed. The way she had systematically cut him off from his childhood friends because they weren't wealthy enough. It wasn't a marriage. It was a hostile corporate takeover of his life. What do we do now? He asked, his eyes suddenly clear and sharp. The naivety was gone. Only steel remained. We do exactly what your mother prepared us to do, I told him. We eliminate the threat. The final confrontation back at the West Loop condo was a masterpiece of cold, legal precision. Julian didn't scream, yell, or break a single object. He sat at the dining table, opened his laptop, and pulled up 24 months of joint bank statements. Vanessa sat across from him, trying to look like a victim of parental interference. Julian spun the monitor around to face her. $18,000, he said. His voice was completely flat. That is the exact amount of money I have deposited into our joint account to fund your lifestyle since our wedding day. Your luxury gym, your designer clothes, your faked startup expenses. Do you know what your total contribution to this marriage has been? Vanessa stared at the glowing spreadsheet. She didn't say a word. Chin tram dola, Julian said, using the Vietnamese phrase for emphasis because it sounded like a heavy toll. $900. You deposited one check for $900 and told me it was from a freelance client. I checked with the bank this morning. That check was a store credit refund for a luxury purse you returned after buying it with my credit card. You have faked your entire professional career since the honeymoon. Vanessa's victim act instantly evaporated into thin air. The sweet, supportive wife vanished, replaced by a snarling, furious monster of pure entitlement. So what? She shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. I am your wife. You are legally obligated to provide a certain standard of living for me. You promised me a future, Julian. You think I wanted to waste my youth living in this pathetic little condo while your arrogant father hoards millions in a mansion? I thought you had real ambition. I thought you were going to be a success. I was going to be a husband, Julian said quietly. You were just looking for a lottery ticket. He snapped the laptop shut. The noise was like a gunshot. This condo is separate property, titled solely in my name before the marriage, Julian continued, standing up. My father's attorney has already drafted your eviction notice. You have 48 hours to pack your belongings and exit this property. If you attempt to contest this divorce, we will subpoena your faked company records and file formal charges of financial fraud and grand larceny. Vanessa looked at Julian with pure, unadulterated hatred. Then she looked at me, her jaw clenching tightly. You planned this from the very beginning, she writted at me. You destroyed my life. I didn't destroy anything, Vanessa, I replied smoothly. I just turned on the lights in the room. You are the one who scattered like a cockroach." She packed her bags and left 48 hours later. The legal divorce process took exactly 4 months. Because of the ironclad prenuptial agreement I had forced her to sign, she walked away with absolutely nothing. Her attorney reviewed our asset protection structure and told her she would lose everything in a court battle. She tried to demand a massive alimony payout, but the judge threw her motion out of court the second we produced the THAM-22 report, proving her faked consulting firm was a total sham. This grueling experience taught me an unforgettable lesson about protecting the people you love. The mistake most people make is believing that love can cure a predator. It can't. Only boundaries can protect you. What Maya understood, even as she lay dying in that hospital bed, was that you cannot defend gentle people with gentle tactics. You need iron. You need legal walls. Kindness without a shield is just a free buffet for the monsters of this world. You need to look at your own relationships right now and ask yourself a hard question. Who is draining your savings, your time, and your mental health without ever making a single deposit? Are you funding someone else's greed just because you are terrified of being alone? 2 years have passed since that dark winter. The Chicago snow has melted, and the Lincoln Park brownstone feels alive again. Julian comes over every single Sunday afternoon for dinner, but he doesn't walk through the front door alone anymore. Last Sunday, I was standing over the stove, stirring a fresh pot of marinara sauce using Maya's old recipe box. The door opened, and Julian's genuine, booming laugh echoed through the house. Walking in right behind him was Clara. Clara is 32, a pediatric nurse who spends her weeks caring for sick children. She drives a battered old sedan, laughs from the bottom of her stomach, and the first time she entered this house, she didn't look at the crown molding. She walked straight to the mantelpiece, looked at Maya's photograph, and asked me what her favorite music was. She wanted to know the soul of the family, not the market value of the real estate. I watched Julian and Clara help each other set the dining table. They bumped shoulders naturally. They smiled in the quiet moments. It wasn't a performance for an audience. It was real. It was generosity in the dark. After we finished eating, Clara insisted on cleaning the kitchen entirely by herself. Julian and I walked out onto the back porch to look at the garden. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and wet earth. I handed my son a glass of red wine from a vintage bottle Maya had saved for a historic occasion. "Dad," Julian said, looking out at the yard. "Thank you." "For what, son?" I asked. "For keeping that deadbolt locked on the study door," he said softly. "For loved me enough to endure my anger until I could finally see the truth." I took a sip of my wine, feeling an overwhelming, radiant sense of closure. The storm had passed, and the foundation of our family was stronger than ever before. "I didn't save you, Julian," I told him, looking at the old maple tree in the yard. "Your mother did. I just held the key. The study remains locked to this day. The code will always be April 9th. But it is no longer a fortress against danger. It is just a room filled with beautiful memories. Because the legacy Maya left behind is finally safe. I want to know exactly what you think about my actions. Did I overstep my boundaries as a father by investigating my daughter-in-law? Or was I completely justified in doing whatever it took to protect my son from a predator? Leave a 1-inch the comments if you think I am a hero, a 2 if you think I should have minded my own business, or a 3 if you think Julian was far too naive for his own good. Tell me where you are watching this video from right now and what time it is in your city. I love connecting with everyone across the globe. If you have ever survived a relationship with a financial manipulator who tried to drain your soul, please share your story down below so we can help others recognize the red flags before it is too late. Please hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see more stories about justice, family protection, and the deep emotional truths of life. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Chicago to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.